Recording. Thank you so much for attending another event from Coaching Agile Journeys. And I just want to share that if this is your first time, we'd love to hear how you found us. We've been going strong for almost 4 years when there were no Agile virtual meetups going on. And so we're so excited that that our message was resonating and more people are joining. So you can find us at coachingagilejourneys.com. Today we have Christy Erbeck, and I'll be introducing her in just 1 second. Hi, Christy. We have our co-hosts, Isaac and Lori, also here, and myself, of course. We do all this on our own time and money, so if you care to donate, just head over to our website, coachingagilejourneys.com, and click buy us some coffee. And so I'm going to then share, before you hop off today, you may want to register for our next event, which is Bob Galen, and it's called Culture Shaping, an Agile Leadership Imperative. And so we had a really awesome chat with Bob, and that's going to be really, really worth your while. After Bob, I believe only a week later, is Ryan Ripley with Fixing Your Scrum. So those are also awesome events. And so I'm going to introduce Christy. So Christy is in Tampa, and so there's a few of us here in Florida who know Christy. She works at Agile Thought as a principal transformation consultant, has over 25 years experience in domestic and international speaking, consulting, training, coaching, working in a bunch of industries, including manufacturing, distribution, sales, and marketing, etc. She has lots of certifications, and what I found really interesting is that she has a degree in industrial and organizational psychology, and of course is a certified Dare to Lead facilitator, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to turn it over to Christy. And Christy, just want to thank you so much for appearing on our virtual meetup today.
You are welcome, Heidi. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today and sharing the work of Brene Brown. And I am one of only 700 certified Dare to Lead facilitators in the world. We had 3 cohorts go through her body of work last year, and I was in the first cohort, and it's been really exciting and interesting to share her work with people in the workplace and help people understand that courage can be learned and that it's not just something that we have innately. You either have it or you don't. And I'm really happy to be here today and see many faces that I recognize and all of the new faces as well. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let's see, I want to share that. I probably am going to have to toggle a bit. Let's get this in PowerPoint mode. And can everybody see the whole screen? And
yes.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, it's the slideshow. Yeah, it looks great.
The slideshow. Okay, great. So I should have had this up when I was saying that, but that's okay. I actually want you to jump right over to menti.com and enter this code 198752. And I'm going to switch out of this and go here. Can you now see the yes. website? Okay. So if you could, there are five basically places that you can answer the question related to how familiar are you with Dare to Lead. I just want to see what we have today in the audience.
I can see the your slideshow, but not the menti.com.
Oh, you can't. Okay, that's what I wanted to. I want you to see what that is. Okay, how's that?
Yep, better.
No BFFs of Brene Brown yet.
I so wished I could select that one.
A lot of people do, and recently she was on 60 Minutes, and her 2 actual best friends were interviewed as part of that segment, and it was really funny because of some of the comments about how people just want to be her best friend, and they come up and act as though they are, and how gracious she is in handling that. And sometimes it's still painful, right? All right. So I'll say it seems like there's more of us that are just getting introduced to Brene, or this is going to be your first exposure to her, than having raving fans and BFFs, but we do have a few raving fans out there. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this and then go back into the deck. And let's see, I go to Zoom and then share. All right, so we're back at the presentation. And the first thing I'd like you to do is, because Dare to Lead is a topic that can sometimes cut to the quick or be related to some emotions that can be very strong, I'd like us to do one of the exercises that she has us do in the work, which is create some permission slips. So this is going to be a self-reflection opportunity where you can write down on a sticky with a Sharpie, what do you need to give yourself permission for today as you are listening to and engaging in the material. So it may be as simple as, I need to give myself permission to be fully present and turn off all of my other devices. But I'm going to just give you a minute, and if you would reflect on that and write a permission slip to what you need. And then when you've got your permission slip written, if you're comfortable, I'll invite people to share a couple of their permission slips, but it's not required.
Well, I can share mine. I think it's for me, it's permission to be courageous, and particularly courageous. And there's, with COVID going on, a lot of ups and downs, and I'm doing some self-reflection already. And so I'm a little bit raw from that. And so this is probably going to go a bit deeper. And so I just need to be brave to press into that and not to be like so concerned about, I guess, self-preservation, right? That I keep it in the safe zone. I really do want to get in and dive into the material. So permission to be courageous for me.
Great. Thank you, Isaac.
I have permission to take the path less traveled.
All right, Heidi, thank you.
I have
be
sorry.
fully present. I am not going to multitask today.
All right, thank you. I heard someone else.
I have
yes.
permission to be open and permission to engage. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And to speak authentically and empathically.
Wonderful, thank you.
To disclose.
To disclose.
I have permission to be open and engage, and then permission to put aside work. So I want to make sure that I put aside work. I've just been slam busy, so this is a nice break for me, actually, to be on this session. So I'm happy you're here.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think mine is more about trying, like somebody else is trying not to multitask and just focus on one thing at a time, given of, all the news that's going on, all the things we have going on in our lives, everything. For myself, I'm also taking online MBA classes, so trying to focus on just focus on one thing right now. Having all those other thoughts pop in your head.
Wonderful.
I think for me, it's being willing to be brave and challenge the norms. I think in an individual level, or focusing on the teams that I'm a servant leader for, it's easier to kind of introduce change and be brave at that level. But looking at the entire enterprise or the larger scale, and continuing to be brave, let's say outside of just IT or outside of our product, is what I want to give myself permission for.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, this is a wonderful, thank you all for sharing your permission slips. And this is a wonderful way to set up safety within an exercise or within a work, we call this container building. And there's a lot of container building that goes on within the curriculum of Dare to Lead. And you'll see in a little while why this is necessary. One of the things that we talk about later on is the concept of the vault. And the vault is really important because unlike the phrase, what we say in Vegas, or what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, actually what happens in Vegas often comes out, right? We hear about the stories and we hear about things that have happened. And the concept of the vault that Brene brings forward is really about, unless we agree as a body with whether it's your team or this group, this is not going to be shared outside of this space. And from a standpoint of that gives us safety and permission to be authentic, to be courageous and brave and show up in a way that we might not have had if we believe that things are going to leak out. It also allows us to talk to each other versus talking about each other. And that's a real great distinction, an important distinction to make in courage building. So as we continue on, with many of you unfamiliar with Brene's work, I'll start by reading this Theodore Roosevelt quote. And she discovered this quote very shortly after her first TED Talk went viral and went from 1, 2, 3, 5 million, 6 million views. And there were tremendous critics that came out. And instead of really being constructive around her work or even questioning her work, they instead personally attacked her, what she looked like, how she sounded, what she wore. And it put her into a really dark place. And as she was working through that dark place, she discovered and came upon this quote from Teddy Roosevelt. And I'm sure at this point you've read it, but it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. And I just lost. Can you? What are you?
Yeah,
all
sorry,
seeing?
it did go off. Can you please reshare? Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. That's okay.
I'm going to make you co-host also.
Okay. And what's important about this is this became her rallying cry and the song that she sang when she was feeling dark and in a shame storm. And it became her way of saying, you know what, if you're not in the arena with me, your criticism, your voice is not going to count. So because the people who are in the arena are failing. They are trying really hard. They are experimenting and doing things that most people wouldn't dare to do. And so if you're not in the arena with me, at least trying to figure your stuff out, I don't really care what you say about me anymore. And it allowed her to rise up out of the shame storm and become who she is and go on to do all of the great things that she has done and continues to do. If we dive into and go back a little bit into her research comprises over 400,000 pieces of data, and her work is qualitative interviews. So she takes and interviews people from all walks of life, all types of skills and backgrounds, and then looks for the trends and the themes in the data. And when she would ask the question, what does courage look like? What does vulnerability look like? People could not identify that. They struggled to say, what is vulnerability? And what are we trying to accomplish here? So when she went back to those same people and asked more specifically, what are the barriers to being courageous? What she found was these items here on the left. She said that the barriers to courage are having tough conversations. We don't want to have them. We'd much rather be nice and polite to each other than we would have a tough conversation that allows for that healthy conflict to come forward and to tell each other our truth. The actual original word courage comes from the Latin cor, and its original definition says to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. And I'm going to say that again because this is a very different definition of courage than what we have today. So its original definition is to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. And that's so radically different than how we view people as having courage today. Whereas courage today often looks like heroics and heroism. And that's not at all what it's intended to be. So in having tough conversations, in having the fears and the feelings or this corroding trust where we get stuck in setbacks, what happens is when we're not willing to have the courage to tell all our heart, we get stuck. And so it's a real struggle for us to show up in a way that is authentic when these types of barriers are in our day-to-day world. And if I were to ask you, if you look at this list, what in this list that you see happening today in your work world, what would be some of the answers?
Fears and feelings, right? The uncertainty of the COVID situation.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Shame and blame.
Shame and blame. Yeah, and what's interesting about the shame and blame is that there's this shame and blame for being on either side. So whether you want to get out and be working, or you are immune compromised, or you have a family member that's immune compromised and you're afraid, and so you want everybody to stay home. Instead of there being this both and conversation, it's this either or, and it is stuck in the shame and blaming of each other versus looking for a holistic both and abundant answer to what's happening today. Thank you, Kelly. What else?
Lack of innovation, for sure.
Say more about that, Heidi.
Well, I feel like, I think maybe it goes to the one right below it, where we're not really engaged in the problem solving. We want to either stall, we can't make decisions quickly enough, or we don't allow diversity of opinion and of thought enough. So it's almost like we don't have the skills for diverse thinking and problem solving skills that we need in order to innovate.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it goes back to the fear of change. That lack of innovation they kind of go hand in hand, where people have been in companies for years and years and years. That's how they've always done it. They don't want to move forward because that means they have to learn something different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I see a lot of doubling down on behaviors that aren't working, and in a context of avoiding the tough conversations, avoiding actually saying we're not getting the results we want, and then we're frustrated nonetheless, and we double down on things that haven't worked in the past.
Mark, thank you so much for that. Yes.
And I think to dovetail on the doubling down and the uncertainty, then the next thing is perfectionism. You want to say the perfect answer. You want to say the right answer. You want to make sure that everything you're saying is corporately correct, if you will. So everything has to matter. Otherwise, one slip up, one misstep could lead, in some cases, whether it's to not being able to have a tough conversation. It kind of all blend. All of these sort of blend into the same type of uncertainty that all of us and many of us are facing. And there are ways to act upon it, including, for example, having to be perfect or having to be tentative or something to that effect.
I was just about to say that too, Joe, that it goes back to tough conversations, that perfectionism, they're kind of tied together a little bit there.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I was on a call with Simon Sinek. He was doing a live broadcast. And one of the things that he said was that companies that are doubling down on innovation are going to see a very different future than those companies that are doubling down on their traditional structure and what they've always done. And how true from the standpoint of, if we don't double down on innovation, how are we going to get through this and become a better organization, society, world than we were when we went into this situation?
Andrea had a question about what do GAUSI values mean?
GAUSI values. You know, that's so interesting, Andrea. Thank you for that question, because it's one that comes up all the time. So GAUSI values are those values that I don't have the slide in this, but it's really about cat posters. So those types of posters that companies have where there's an eagle soaring and it says that integrity is everything, or excellence, or we're soaring to the mountains. But you look around or you observe the behavior within that organization and there is nothing like excellence. So there's nothing like integrity or teamwork happening. They are gauzy. They're just these pretenses and statements of what the company wants, but there's nothing happening relative to those statements. Does that help?
Like the demotivational posters.
Well, it sounds like gaudy values in a way. I mean, just yeah.
True.
Gaudy and gauzy, yes.
Yes.
We're seeing a lot of that. You know, I was just on a call and you know, they were boasting about how they were so quickly able to work with the design team and get this new product out, you know, in response to COVID. And somebody posed a question right after that. Well, when are we going to cut back on the 77 plus hours per week it took to do that? You know, yeah. So
there is the rub, the tyranny of that billable hour, just the more we do, you know, the better we're going to get. And we forget that we, you know, I know this is overstated, but we are not human doings. We are human beings. And doing and busy work and activity does not necessarily equate to value, productivity, a sense of health, or anything like that. So all of this ties together to having those tough conversations around, you know, who we really are and how we want to show up in our world. So let's keep going on. Oh,
yeah, Christy,
sorry.
I just wanted to mention, no, you're good. I just wanted to mention, I think a lot of this, and it ties into where you're going, I'm sure, but a lot of this ties into the difference between focusing on outcome versus focusing on output. Organizations that are constantly focused on output are the ones who are really struggling because they're just trying to produce more and more and more to try to one thing to solve the problem, instead of focusing on outcome and building as little as possible to achieve the right goal. So I think it's just a matter of touching on that, you know, as bring it together.
Beautifully said. And it takes a lot of courage to move as an organization from outputs to outcomes, because it's such a different way of working and thinking and measuring what matters, right? So it's very different. So I'm going to stop sharing and go out to menti.com. And if you would go to that same code and let's see, share, and we'll go to the, I gotta move that. Go to the next screen, which is, what does daring leadership look like to you? And let's see what comes back. I think you can put up to 3 words. You have 3 chances to put words in.
This is pretty awesome right now.
This is fantastic. I love it. Beautiful. Oh my goodness. All right.
I haven't used Menti before, Christy, so thank you for this. I will be using it from here on out.
It's a really great tool, and I'm just using the free version, which allows you 2 questions. If you want to go to the paid version, then you can do a whole lot more, but just the free version, just being able to ask these 2 questions and then get that scale.
Great for
and
retros.
then this word cloud. Okay, awesome. All right. That's, I mean, look at all of that. And there's quite the theme: empathy, humility, trust, transparency, vulnerability, freedom, bravery, empowerment, communication, being transformational, down to earth, righteous empathy, safe to fail. These are great. These are great. So what I'd like to do now, I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the deck, and we'll keep going with, let's see. Okay, so let's move into the 4 skill sets, because how many of you think that courage can be learned versus how many think it's just you either got it or you don't?
You can learn.
You can learn. So somebody thinks you can learn.
Oh, I agree with that. You can learn courage.
You can't. You can. Again, when she first did her studies, you know, she went in with the hypothesis that it was innate, right? And then it was disproved, and it actually got, when she got really granular with the people, it came out that no, these are skills that I learned along the way. So I might have had bits, or I might have been brave at some point, and I felt the fear and I did it anyway. She says that rumbling with vulnerability is the #1 skill set. And in her book, Dare to Lead, and even in the curriculum, about half of the curriculum is spent dealing with the rumbling with vulnerability and understanding what does that mean. Today, we don't have that time to go into extreme detail, but it does speak to the fact that you can learn to do this. It takes practice, and the points that we make in the curriculum is that the curriculum is here just to get you started. Your real journey begins once you've taken the class or read the book or done some of the work, and as you continue to practice in the real world. This becomes how you show up. And so in rumbling with the vulnerability and the phrase embrace the suck, it's a military phrase that while you are going through the crap, you just keep going, you suck it up and you go through it, you keep going until you get to the other side. And that is how you get through, by just accepting it. So she says you can't, yep.
I just have a quick comment on the word rumbling, because it's very much a metaphor in a way. I'm thinking of when you're going too fast on the highway and you lose focus and you veer onto the rumble strips, and it kind of wakes you up. Like, I feel like that's the sensation you have to have when you're leading like this.
That's beautifully said, because as we'll get to in a little bit, you're going to start to feel the emotions that go along with vulnerability. We're going to talk through that. And so, yes, rumbling with vulnerability is an emotion. And as you get better at rumbling with vulnerability, it doesn't mean you cut off the feelings. And in fact, you probably feel them more because you are more aware of the sensations that you have. But what ends up happening is you know how to manage yourself through the rumble, and you are able to steer yourself, as was that Kelly that said, get back onto the highway. more clearly. I'm sorry, I cannot see everybody. So when some people speak, I'm not sure who that might be. So yes, you can't get to that courage until you rumble, until you feel those emotions and are able to come out on the other side. And what she says often is these are the feelings that when we go into the cave and we first start to rumble with our emotions and rumble with vulnerability, these types of emotions start to surface. So that uncertainty, that anxiety, that fear, the scarcity, the contraction that happens in our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts as we walk into that cave. And oftentimes this translates into shame. And if you've not heard before, she differentiates shame from guilt and from humiliation. And so guilt is the feeling of I did something bad. I stole something from the store, for example, or I told a lie, or I didn't come home when I should have come home, as a teenager. Those are things that I should feel guilty for, and different levels of guilt based on the lie, based on how late I was in coming home, or what I was doing when I didn't come home, what I stole, or how I went about doing that. There are different variations of guilt. So that means I did something bad. And somebody has raised a hand.
I had a question about what you meant by scarcity.
Okay. So when we talk about scarcity is a feeling and a sensation that happens that causes contraction in our body. And often it's used as scarcity thinking. So scarcity thinking says there is a pizza, there's only 8 slices, and once those 8 slices are gone, you're done. You can't have any more. So it's a finite set feeling or a finite sense of understanding or viewing the world or a situation.
That was kind of what I wanted to speak to, actually, that as I step out more in my work, one of the things that plagues me is this sense of I can't be enough. I won't be enough. There's not enough of me. And that really gets amped up for me and gets in my way.
Mark, thank you for sharing that. And I will say you are enough, and there will be enough of you, because you have the ability to tap into the universe and the global sense of humanness. We are more than enough. And that sense of I am not enough, I'm not going to have enough or do enough or be enough leads us to that sense of shame, which can translate to there's something wrong with me. So I am bad. So in those same examples of lying, staying out too late, stealing something, the sense of shame moves into I am bad. And so from a standpoint of not being enough or not having enough, that scarcity and shame are bedfellows in many ways.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let me share this related to shame. So shame needs 3 things to live: secrecy, silence, and judgment. And the reason we talk about going into the cave is because often when we are feeling uncertainty, anxiety, fear, scarcity, and shame, we want to go to a dark place. We want to cover up. We want to hide. We want to not be seen, right? And shame thrives in that cold, dark place. And in our next exercise, I'm going to ask you to draw how shame triggers show up in your body. And the picture that you see in front of you right now is how shame shows up for me. So when I'm in shame, a whole ton of things go on in my body. First of all, I begin to disconnect, and it's almost as if I am floating outside of my body. I can't hear very well. I get a ringing in my ears instead. My brain shuts down. I can't think. I can't remember what I've said, what other people have said. It just becomes like this really dark fog. Become totally disassociated with the situation. My fingers go numb and tingly, and they get really cold. I get a deep pit in my stomach, and there's this energy that radiates out. And to whoever asked about the scarcity, I start to feel incredibly scarce. And so I created a little black heart. I just get very, very small. I start every negative thing that has ever happened to me, that has ever been said to me, that has ever occurred in my life, and then some, because I start talking negative self-talk to me happens, and I start judging myself if I'm able to even move. Sometimes, depending on the level of shame, I can become almost comatose. It is a horrific experience, and it's incredibly discouraging to feel this way. Discouraging doesn't even begin to explain it, but I just want to run away and hide and never come back. And so in dealing with shame, as I start to understand how I'm responding or what I'm feeling, I can at least become aware of, oh, this is what's happening. I'm starting to come into a shame storm, or my shame is being triggered by some action that's just happened, some conversation, the way somebody talked to me, looked at me, something that I just did. And it's gone beyond the humiliation and the guilt, and has dove right into all my crap, right? If Brene were on the call, she would actually swear. Because we're recording, I will not, but I would like to be able to say the other word too. So in this next exercise, I want you to take your piece of paper, and I want you to draw a figure, an outline of a figure, however you would like to draw that outline. And taking your colored markers or your pencils or your crayons, I want you to spend about 3 minutes drawing, 2 to 3 minutes, drawing where does your shame show up? What does it feel like? What does it look like? What colors does it take on? How are we doing? We have about 10 seconds left. Okay. So now again, I'll invite anyone to share what is maybe one or two of their shame triggers look or feel like that they're comfortable with.
Well, I'll say it really resonated with me in your previous image from you, that cloud over your head. I find I love thinking clearly and intentionally, and when I feel that kind of shame start to set in, it is like my brain doesn't seem to work the same way. I just want to curl up in a ball. And then there's also a downward, and I kind of drew it with as like downward force arrows. There's like a gravity that just everything feels heavy, and I just want to either normally I like to be light and up and moving around, and I just either want to sit or lay down and just not even get up. Everything just feels heavy. And then lastly, the sense of I kind of drew this thing falling over. Like I feel like everything in my world is toppling over, and I'm powerless to grab it and steady it. So it's a very overwhelming feeling of just I'm not good enough is essentially the essence of it.
Yeah. Thank you, Isaac. Yeah.
I'm going to share for the first time, and hope you'll get the meaning of this, and I won't explain it.
Okay.
You feel like
How do I
nothing.
see?
I can't see who that is. Who
Matt.
is
Matt.
It's Matt.
You want to
feels-
disappear.
No, I did disappear.
Oh.
The shame makes me feel as if I have disappeared.
Can you show it again, Matt? Thank you.
It's blank.
It's just a blank piece of paper.
That's the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Matt.
I think for me, it's more of if I feel shame, it's more of getting red with embarrassment. And then that translates to anger, meaning my face, everything gets angry and get defensive. So I don't know how this comes off here, but it's more like I have a, it's like I have a shield. So then all of a sudden I then have to respond with shielding myself or go on the offensive so that I can basically not only feel protected, but also to go after someone. So then they feel more, they feel, I guess, weaker than I do when it comes to that.
Yes. And Joe, that we won't talk about it necessarily today, but she talks about the armor. We armor up, and we put that armor on to push people away, to hide behind. There's a variety of reasons we will armor up, and that's a natural defense mechanism to feeling the shame. So thank you.
Yeah, I had something similar to the disappearing. I don't know if you can see mine, but it's where I just want to get small, and I want the attention and the focus to shift off of me as fast as possible. So I just go quiet and try to go into the corner, and like somebody else can, so I can sit there and feel really bad about what I did or said or less than.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else before we move on?
I can echo what Andrea said as another Andrea. And basically, I've been laid off twice. So, I go into this mode where I can't be seen and I cannot see. And it makes me want to, go into hiding, fetal position. My heart becomes sunken. It feels intellectually not like shame, like I know I'm fine, but the emotional aspect it's very hard to shut down. It's the first thing that happens. So
it is thank you. And I think I saw one more. Skip, are you trying to
yes, there aren't any colors here, but I'll tell you what they were.
Okay.
Red ears, closed eyes, white pursed lips, this purple gurgle coming up through my belly, and then a cold blue feeling coming in from the inside.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the colors and the temperatures. That's important, because one of the things that I realized and found is that we right now are almost sensory deprived in this situation. We get to see each other and we can hear each other, but the sense of touch and all of the other senses that go on when we are in person have been stripped away from us, and that in and of itself can trigger some shame and feelings of hopelessness in us. So thank you all for sharing that, and thank you for doing the exercise, even if you did not share. And what I want to offer is the hope that the other side of shame is where shame is in the darkness, vulnerability is in the light. And what I mean by that is that on the other side of these negative feelings is love, belonging, and joy. And this is where I love to talk about Brené's work, because I believe in the abundance mentality and philosophy, which is the opposite of scarcity. So whereas scarcity is finite, abundance is infinite, and love, belonging, and joy are all infinite. There will always be enough of this. And as we step into this, vulnerability and empathy are the antidote to shame. And those both live in love, belonging, and joy. And what's interesting is while shame has all of those triggers, when we feel vulnerable, those same triggers are brought forward. And so it's really important that when we're feeling vulnerable, that we reach out to the right people, that we connect with the person or the people that will hold the space for us to feel vulnerable, to feel those emotions, to feel those triggers, and not go into shame. Or if we are feeling that shame and that scarcity, that uncertainty, that those people are going to come alongside us and help us move to the love, belonging, and joy. And so love, belonging, and joy goes hand in hand with all of the things that you see on the left-hand side: the courage, trust, creativity, accountability, hard conversations, the willingness to sit down and sit across from somebody and let them know what you're really thinking. Sometimes hard conversations are just telling a friend that, you know what, I know I've said in the past that I really like doing this or that, but in reality, I don't. I do it because you like it. And that's great. I can do that sometimes. But other times I can't go do those things. I have to go do these things to feed my soul. Can you do these things with me and we can feed our souls together, just a different way? And if that's your best friend and you're having that conversation, or your spouse and you've never had that conversation before, that's a really tough, courageous, vulnerable position to be in. Right? All of these things are what will take us to the courage, to the empathy, to that other side, and out of the cave and into the light. So for this next exercise, I want to know, and I don't necessarily want to know directly, you don't have to tell me, but I want you to create a square squad. So one of the exercises that we do in the curriculum is that we write on a sticky whose opinions matter to you. So if you remember back to the Theodore Roosevelt quote, at the time, Brené was really wrapped up in everybody's opinion of her. And when those opinions didn't match who she knows herself to be, she would go into a shame storm. And she had to learn how to reach out to somebody who was safe, who would allow her to be vulnerable, who would not diss her shame, who would not negate it, downplay it, but would actually come alongside her and say, I get it. I've been there too. And help her out of that position. So what I'd like you to do is write on a sticky the names of the people that opinions matter to you. And this is going to be a small group. So it should fit on a sticky this size or smaller. Like this is mine. So I'll share this with you. Bruce is my husband of almost 17 years. Rebecca is my sister. And Christina is my accountability partner from Dare to Lead. She and I have become very good friends. And I know that when I'm in trouble, I'm struggling with something, I can reach out to her and she's going to be honest with me. She knows me well enough. And they're going to come alongside and lift me up when I'm not feeling good about myself, when I'm not feeling enough. And that's often, more often than you might think. So take a moment and write down on your square whose opinions matter to you.
It's okay. Mhm.
In the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving so we get through the rest of the material. I don't want to leave you hanging. So the skill set number 2 is living into our values. And as we talked about earlier, this means no cat posters, no gauzy values, no values that are meaningless. You know, at Agile Thought, one of the things that I actually love deeply about Agile Thought is that our values are observable and behavior-based. So we can actually look at our 7 core values and see them showing up or not in our organization. And this is so important that as we are working through our values, our personal values, and especially if we're in limbo, maybe we've been let go and we are looking for a new home, a new work home, I would really encourage you to do an exercise about your core values and then look into and understand the companies that you're researching, what their values are, and see the level of alignment there is. Because we know from an engagement standpoint, the more aligned our personal values are with our corporate values, the easier it is for people to do work and to be inspired and to want to apply their creativity and their knowledge to the workplace. I recently went through this exercise and I thought that I had my core values pretty well set. And come to find out, I was living 2 values that were designed to please other people and not myself. And that was a pretty sobering moment because I believe myself to be a fairly strong, valued, and principled person. And at the time, they were meaningful and they were true. But the intent and the motivation behind me choosing them were designed to please other people and not myself. And I've since recalibrated my values. And thankfully, not much has changed as a result. And what's interesting is I think these were values that I held, but I didn't think that they were valuable enough to put forward. And what I realized in doing this exercise was by me not like leaning into these 3 values, it was me not leaning into who I am. And I was compromising who I am to please other people. And so it was quite a deep lesson, and one that I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to go through and made the time to recalibrate that. So while I don't have an exercise for you to do in this session related to values, I do have an exercise that if you email me, I can send to you for you to work through and understand what your core values are, how do they show up in your life, and moving them from BS to actual behaviors so that you have visible behaviors, you have an accountability partner, you know how to lean in and how others can lean into you to hold you accountable to those values. These are just examples of values. There are hundreds and hundreds of values out there. If you don't see something on the list that I provide to you in the exercise, you're welcome to look at other lists, or if you know what it is, you're welcome to just use that and throughout the rest of the exercise. Are there any other questions before I move on to the third skill set?
There's actually, Christy, a great question in the chat that we might bring up. Are these contextual? And so we're talking about the people on your square list, as in some opinions matter maybe with work and others with family. So do you have a card separately, or do you really try to combine them into these are the people holistically?
My list is holistic. If it makes sense for you to separate them out, then that's okay. I guess my challenge to you would be, we live in an integrated world. And sometimes the opinions in this way, think about it from a standpoint of if your work were on display and you were in the arena, you were in the public, and somebody from society, whether it's work or the public or even your family member, said something about your work. Whose opinion matters in that? And how do you move from taking in that information as feedback, which is important, especially in our agile world, inspect and adapt. We have to take in that feedback, but we have to discern the level and the importance and the value of that feedback, and even the context of that feedback. Somebody could say to me, this was a crap presentation, or you really didn't share what you should have shared about Brené's work, or they could say that they love this. Well, all of that is feedback. Depending on what I do and how I take that in, and do I care, what they said? To some extent, I'm going to care because I want to improve. But if there were scathing remarks or comments, most likely I would let them roll off my back because they're not on my square. Does that help?
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. So skill set number 3, braving trust. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And this could not be more important than right now in clarity. We so need clarity in our workplaces, in our homes, in our society. We need clarity. We need to understand what's next and what's happening. And Brené created an acronym for the word braving that we'll go through very quickly here. But the reason we need this clarity is because clarity creates color and context. And when we have clarity, we know how we should behave in the situation. And braving stands for boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, like we talked about at the very beginning of the session, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. And there's a whole bunch of material that goes around behind this. But these items, if we use this as the basis for team building, we will create amazing levels of trust. Because we have the boundaries, and so we know where our fences are. We know what type of fence we have. We know who can come in, who can't come in. How high is our fence? What type of fence should there be? And this creates structure that is very helpful to us as human beings to know how to act and interact in any given situation. The reliability then is, you can rely on me to do what I said I'm going to do, because also flip down further is the integrity aspect. I'm accountable to myself and to my team, and that accountability, as I continue to act on what I'm accountable for, I'm building trust. As we talked about the vault earlier, the vault is that safe space, that sacred space that we can go into and we can share and be open and honest and transparent without repercussions for that transparency, authenticity, and openness. We're not talking about people, we're talking to people. The integrity is choosing courage over comfort. It's choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. And it is what allows us to, it's the grit. It's the grit of our personality in some ways. The non-judgment is a place where we can sit and allow people to show up and as they are, regardless of how they are. And not place judgment there, but offer grace, because we don't know what situation they just walked out of or came from. And it's not my place to judge. We were called to love, not judge. And that space and that grace opens up again for that abundance mentality, and doesn't mean that we aren't going to hold somebody accountable for however they showed up, especially if they showed up in a way that was maybe not helpful to the team. But we have to release our judgment in people. And then the generosity aspect of being generous with our time and with our attention. And I see I am over time. So learning to rise, we want to check the conspiracies and confabulations. And what that means is we're going to get beat up. We're going to fall face down in that arena. And that's okay. As long as you have a clear understanding of who's in your support section, you will rise again. And it does not matter what the box seats, the cheap seats, or the season ticket holders say about you. What matters is that you rise up and rise up again and continue that process. Integrity is choosing courage over comfort. And this is a critical aspect to who we are and how we lead. The heart of daring leadership and in being with Brene was just so powerful. And I feel blessed to have been able to go through that program with her and to know that her work continues and that I get to spread this type of good news to people around the world. This is a video. It's very short, and I'm hoping the sound comes through. It's called the Manifesto of the Brave and Brokenhearted.
Christy, I don't think the audio is coming through.
You're not getting the audio?
No. When you clicked on, if you stop sharing and then maybe hit share again, one of the options you can do is say to send audio from your computer. It's a checkbox in the Zoom window.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Let me just turn this.
Manifesto of the Brave and Brokenhearted. There is no greater threat to the critics and cynics and fearmongers than those of us who are willing to fall because we've learned how to rise. With skinned knees and bruised hearts, we choose owning our stories of struggle over hiding, over hustling, over pretending. When we deny our stories, they define us. When we run from struggle, we are never free. So we turn toward truth and look it in the eye. We will not be characters in our stories, not villains, not victims, not even heroes. We are the authors of our lives. We write our own daring endings. We craft love from heartbreak, compassion from shame, grace from disappointment, courage from failure. Showing up is our power. Story is our way home. Truth is our song. We are the brave and brokenhearted. We are rising strong.
So I will leave you with, you all are the light of the world. And as you are courageous and vulnerable, and as you rise out of the arena time and time again, we have the power to change the world. Thank you.
Wow, Christy, thank you so much. Just on behalf of everyone here, and so many people stayed on. There's several that did have to drop, but so many people stayed on just for the extra. This has been such great, and I'll just say very timely content. I know for many of us, with everything going on right now, and there is that fear and uncertainty, this is just such a timely message. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And we are a few minutes over time, but everyone who stayed, I want to thank you so much for staying on with us. And I just really appreciate you guys as a community. And Christy, again, thank you so much. I'll encourage everybody, join us for our next event. You can go to coachingagilejourneys.com. But there's a lot to digest here. So take your notes and your images and do digest this. Stay safe, and we'll see you at a future Coaching Agile Journeys event. Christy, everyone else, thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.